And the two-day G20 Summit has concluded in New Delhi, with India handing over the presidency to Brazil. Well, the action-packed two-day event was marked by breakthroughs and beauty.
मेरा प्रस्ताव है कि हम नवंबर के अंत में G20 का एक वर्चुअल सेशन और रखें। उस सेशन में हम इस समिट के दौरान तय विषयों की समीक्षा कर सकते हैं। इन सब की डिटेल्स हमारी टीम आप सभी के साथ शेयर करेगी। मैं उम्मीद करता हूं कि आप सब इससे जुड़ेंगे।
The summit started with the inclusion of African Union as a permanent member of the grouping of world's largest economies. Just hours later, the seemingly elusive joint declaration was agreed upon and adopted. The early breakthrough further cemented India's position at the global high table. An agreement on the toned-down language while mentioning the war in Ukraine and dropping any reference to criticize Russia for the same. It established India's role as an efficient arbitrator. Well, India says it used the G20 presidency to focus on the needs and aspirations of countries of the global south. With the setting up of a global biofuels agreement and a call for $5.8 trillion in climate finance, India has successfully placed itself as the voice of Global South. While in the declaration, the G20 nations also agreed on the need to reform key multilateral institutions, including development banks, to make access to finances easy for developing nations across the world. Well, the first day of the summit saw two important sessions, One Earth and the other one on family. On day two, that is today, the G20 leaders, along with the special invitees, they visited the Rajghat and offered their tributes to Mahatma Gandhi. Post that somber event, the leaders went back to work with the third session on One Future, starting immediately thereafter. Finally, the summit concluded with Prime Minister Modi handing over the presidency to Brazil's President Lula da Silva. Brazil will take over the G20 presidency from December this year. And for more on this, our correspondent Molly Gambhir is joining us live from Bharat Mandapam, the venue of the G20 Summit. Hi Molly, now what were some of the big takeaways according to you as the G20 Summit has now concluded?
Well, there are several layers to those takeaways, Rahesha, as far as the action-packed G20 summit here in New Delhi is concerned. We're coming to you from the G20 summit venue's International Media Center at this point, and the hectic activity that the epicenter of all that activity has seen over here in New Delhi, given the fact that the Indian G20 presidency came at a very challenging time in the backdrop, coming against the backdrop of the Russia-Ukraine war and the challenges that it brings along and the way it has impacted power equations as well. Also simultaneously talking about the fallout of the COVID-19 pandemic and the resultant impact on supply chain issues, for example. So putting all of that together, the expectations were running high when the G20 summit kicked off. And earlier in the day, yesterday, we saw the inclusion of the African Union, the 55-member bloc, being formally inducted into the G20 group. This, remember, is the first expansion of this crucial grouping since its inception. And the message here being a very significant one that India has sent out, that being of inclusivity, being a representation also of the global south, and that's been a very important part of India's messaging here through the G20 presidency. Talking about the need for the global south to actually be represented in the way that it deserves and the way that the changes in today's world actually demands. Beyond that, we saw a very significant milestone in the Indian G20 presidency through the announcement that had come in from the Indian Prime Minister earlier in the evening yesterday on day one about the breakthrough in the joint declaration. The very fact that that we saw the developments panning out the way that they did as far as that declaration is concerned has been hailed as being a breakthrough moment, and also speaks volumes about India's diplomatic efforts and the way it has forged consensus, given the fact that there were serious concerns over the divisions among the member countries influencing the outcome of this summit gathering. Let's also talk about the other significant aspects when it comes to the India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor, which of course seeks to represent regions that make up about a third of the global economy, and that in itself has been something that the grouping has focused on. We also saw a lot of symbolism attached to the developments that panned out on day 2 today, be it the assembling of the leaders at Rajghat, paying homage to Mahatma Gandhi, and someone who has represented non-violence, and the messaging here being, respecting non-violence at a time of conflict. Then we also saw the handing over of the presidency to Brazil, which of course marks a significant chapter as far as the G20 journey is concerned. Another significant aspect was the tree plantation that we saw, the saplings that were planted, the symbolism attached there as well, because these saplings basically representing native species of some of the member countries, and the very fact that this talks about the environmental consciousness factor, climate action has been something that India has been also focusing on as a part of its G20 mission, because the very fact that we've talked about the tripling of the global renewable energy capacity by the year 2030 has been another significant takeaway. So overall, Rahesha, there are so many layers to the kind of breakthroughs, the kind of achievements that the G20 Summit has achieved as far as the Indian G20 efforts are concerned, and building consensus, inclusivity being emerging as the voice of the global south being the overarching themes as far as India's efforts are concerned.
Absolutely, Molly. Quite a successful G20 summit out there. But also talk to us about how India's soft power was at display in the past 2 days.
Well, yes, and like I said, the symbolism was very evident, and it's something that also has been making headlines apart from what we've seen panning out as a part of the meetings, as a part of the bilateral discussions that the Indian Prime Minister has been having as well. The very fact that India has been regarded as a country which has been spearheading efforts, be it in terms of the soft power display through yoga, be it in terms of the way in which it has brought countries together on a variety of aspects through its rich cultural heritage as well. And that has been something that we've been seeing through the day as well. Like I said, with the leaders gathering at Yes.
Right, Molly. Thank you so much for joining us on WION, sharing insights with us as the G20 Summit concludes here in India's national capital, New Delhi.